Spider-Man No Way Home. So this film continues Phase 4 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it is the third time that Tom Holland has played Spider-Man / Peter Parker in a solo Spider-Man film. And to be honest, it is easily the most anticipated film in the MCU since Avengers Endgame. In fact, it's probably the most excited that I've been to watch a film since that film came out back in 2019. But I also do think that the expectations of Spider-Man No Way Home was fueled based on the build-up to the release of the film. And not to mention, there have been rumours for years about old characters coming back into the story again. And I'm not just talking about old characters that are, considered old enemies of Spider-Man who've been in the MCU already. I'm talking about other characters from a different universe, in this case, which were previous Spider-Man films, actually coming into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it's crazy because we know the complications around the Spider-Man character in terms of rights because of Sony and Marvel and Disney, etc. But there were rumours that were becoming bigger and bigger as the production of the film went on, and we got that in the trailer. There was a sense of nostalgia about this film because we were seeing old villains that we've seen before coming into the MCU when originally they weren't even part of it. So there were, expectations about how it was going to come together. And it also raised a few question marks for me, where it was almost like it was going to rely a lot on that nostalgia, but also made me kind of curious as to how it will go on and develop the series even further. So Spider-Man No Way Home takes place immediately after the events of Spider-Man Far From Home, in which Spider-Man's identity is revealed. And this leaves Peter in a very difficult position because he is no longer able to separate his normal life from the high stakes of being a superhero. So when Peter asks for help from Doctor Strange to make people forget that he is Spider-Man, the stakes suddenly become a lot more dangerous, therefore forcing him to discover what it truly means to be Spider-Man. So as I mentioned earlier about the rumours of old characters coming back and finding out that they were actually true, I almost had a nickname for this film where it was called Spider-Man Into the Spoilerverse, because we knew a lot of crucial points where I think if it was a film of a different kind of scale or magnitude, having the surprise of seeing so many old villains come back would have been even better. But at the same time, you've got to look at it from another perspective where it's a big film, it's Spider-Man, there's a lot of expectation, it's in a massive series now. They've got to hype it up and build it up even more to make people interested in Phase 4 of the MCU. So it depends on how you look at it really. You can look at it one or two ways. But I think what's interesting, I think what this film did really well in was that a lot of Spider-Man films in the past, particularly Spider-Man 3, have been ridiculed and shamed for having too many villains and too many subplots. But in Spider-Man No Way Home it made sense because they were following the same story and structure, but they had their own different motives. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're actually setting up a Sinister Six film in the future in the MCU, which of course was meant to happen within the Sony version of Spider-Man film starring Andrew Garfield. But I think with Spider-Man No Way Home, you could look at it where it was pretty much like a fan service film in which we saw some things that, you think, oh my god, wow! But you've also got to ask the question, is it relevant now for the future of the franchise? It was something that challenged Spider-Man as a superhero, but it was also something that was a nice introduction and inclusion in terms of the multiverse aspect of the franchise, which is what we're going to see in future installments. So I think that was what was crucial as to what was going to happen within the film. And the film itself was just brilliant. I really enjoyed it. It was thoroughly entertaining and the visuals were fantastic, and there were some things that made me question, especially as far as the villains are concerned, where I had reservations about will it be as realistic as how it was before, or will it be the opposite? And of course, since the other Spider-Man films, people have aged since then and technology has changed. So how will they make this tie into the franchise that is familiar in many ways to the installments that we had before? And I get that people could argue that it's, a typical fan service film that's just there to satisfy the audience, but it's a relevant fan service film because it touches upon things in the past, yes, to get people interested, but the story and their involvement benefits the series now and the series going forward. And I just thought it was fun and entertaining, and it just blended things really well. And the narrative structure did become the broadest in Phase 4 so far because it just opened up even more avenues. That at this point at least doesn't feel like a problem, but it makes us more excited for what's going to happen next. And you'll definitely know what I mean when you watch the credit scenes of this film. Honestly, some of the best that I've seen in this series so far, and I can't wait to see how things come together in the future. And that's what I think this film does. It brings a lot of the past into the present time for the future without it feeling too cluttered and clunky and lazy, at least in my opinion. Tom Holland's an absolutely fantastic actor. I think he's truly one of the most gifted young British actors around at the moment. And when I found out that he was playing Spider-Man, I thought to myself, ooh, interesting. Because he was very young like Peter Parker was, whereas previous actors Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire were a little bit older. I've always found Tobey Maguire to be the better Peter Parker, Andrew Garfield the better Spider-Man, but Tom Holland to be the best at both of them because he brings a lot more wit, but he also gives us that sense of charm. We've seen Tom Holland appear 6 times as Spider-Man now. The first time in Captain America Civil War, in which he appeared halfway through the film, Spider-Man Homecoming in his first solo appearance, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man Far From Home, and now Spider-Man No Way Home. He's obviously the one actor who's played Spider-Man the most. He gave us a very emotional performance in this one, I would say. I really kind of felt connected to the character in terms of the consequence of being a superhero and worrying about his family and his loved ones and what responsibilities he has in order to defeat his enemies. And I know a lot of people have said it's almost like the conclusion, and that raises a few questions as to whether this is actually Tom Holland's final appearance. But if it is, he's been an absolutely fantastic Spider-Man. In another role, Zendaya plays MJ, and she has a lot more of a role in this film compared to the previous Spider-Man films that we've had. I mean, the character in herself is called MJ, and she serves as a homage to Mary Jane Watson, who we have previously seen in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films, but her actual name is Michelle Jones Watson, so she's not directly the same character, she's just coincidentally got the same initials. Now, being only a kid, we knew that Spider-Man had a mentor and his name was Tony Stark, but unfortunately he died at Avengers Endgame, and now he's been basically replaced by Doctor Strange, played by Benedict Cumberbatch. I've always thought that Benedict Cumberbatch was a perfect match for Doctor Strange because he is a quirky and unusual actor and has a very unorthodox approach to his performances. And again, he did an absolutely fantastic job. And like Tom Holland, Cumberbatch perfected his American accent. You wouldn't know really that Benedict Cumberbatch and Tom Holland were both British. So in a way, this is the film of the British Avengers. So as I said before, we had a total of 5 pre-MCU Spider-Man villains who all came back and were played by the same actors again. So I'm going to first start off with Dr. Octopus, who was played by Alfred Molina, and he was a villain who was in Spider-Man 2 back in 2004, which feels a lifetime ago now, and he was truly one of the best villains that we've seen in a superhero film. The character actually died at the end of Spider-Man 2, and seeing Molina come back after 17 years, he still felt the exact same Doc Ock we know and love from back then, and that's what I applaud Molina for. He did an absolutely fantastic job, and I will say the same for Willem Dafoe as well. And we knew that he was going to be in it because he was in the trailer and he was on the poster, but I thought we didn't get ultimately the best out of Willem Dafoe's character. As good as he was in the first Spider-Man film and made very limited appearances in Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, I still think he had a lot more to offer, and we got more this time, and that's what I think was satisfying, because he was a truly remarkable performer as that character back in 2002, and that's why for me it seals the fact that he's truly one of the best villains that we've seen in any superhero film. Jamie Foxx returns as Electro, who previously appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and to be honest, I wasn't keen on the film nor Jamie Foxx's portrayal, but this time I thought to myself, you know what, I think he's actually quite good. Maybe the expectation of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 back then wasn't so high. I thought, you know what, it's not going to be very good. In fact, it's been a long time coming, but I will actually re-watch The Amazing Spider-Man and its sequel. Jamie Foxx's Electro was among the sources of humour in the film, but crucially there were subtle hints about Spider-Man and other things going forward in the future that could influence what could happen next. And when you watch the film, you'll know what I mean. And also, Rhys Ifans reprises his role as the Lizard / Dr. Kurt Connors from The Amazing Spider-Man, as does Thomas Hayden Church as Flint Marko / Sandman in Spider-Man 3. So overall, from a broad perspective, you could argue that Spider-Man No Way Home was something that was just mere satisfaction for the fans. It didn't have to be in the way that it was done. It didn't need to be nostalgic, but it was relevant to the present time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and what's going to happen next. In fact, it's a nice blend of all three. In the past for its nostalgia and events that have occurred in previous installments, the present time for what's happening now and where the MCU is currently at, and also in the future of how the past and present events will influence what's going to happen. And watching this film was almost like I was in some kind of illusion, because the film itself almost is, because of the inclusion of multiverses and different dimensions, etc. So it's an alternate universe within itself, but it kind of plays with the audience's mind in many ways. It's an alternate universe that acknowledges the audience. And what I mean by that is we've had 3 sets of Spider-Man films, and in the films we've gone to the alternate universe in our world to pick out something and bring into that world in the MCU, and it worked. So the film very uniquely connects things together by creating a multiverse within the story while also acknowledging the audience and, you know, the multiverse of the film industry. In many ways, a lot like what X-Men Days of Future Past did back in 2014 by introducing all the old X-Men characters into the current X-Men universe. Whether we'll get X-Men and Spider-Man into the MCU, it seems realistic now given what happens in this film, but only time will tell. So what did you think of Spider-Man No Way Home? Was your mind blown watching this film? Were you focused particularly on the nostalgia? Are you looking forward to seeing where the series goes next? Or are you a bit disappointed that it focused too much on the past and not enough on the present and the future? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you did want to enjoy this video, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more, and have a notification bell tick so you're notified when I upload a new video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care everybody.